I'm going to begin my vehicle inspection by checking my clearance lights and turn indicators, making sure they're properly mounted, amber in color, not cracked, tased, or broken. I'm going to check my headlights the same way, making sure they're clear in color. I'm going to check all hoses on this side of the truck, making sure they're all properly mounted. They have no holes, cuts, rips, tears, dry rot, and that they have no leaks. I'm going to check all electrical lines on this side of the truck, making sure they're all properly mounted, that they have no holes, cuts, rips, tears in the insulation, there's no bare or exposed wires, and that all the connections are tight and secure. I'm going to begin by checking my alternator, making sure it's properly mounted. That it has no cracks or illegal welds. It's belt driven. I'm going to push and pull on the belt, making sure it doesn't move more than 3/4 inches. I'm going to check my coolant reservoir, making sure it's properly mounted, that it's between the add and the full marks, that the cap is present and on tight, and that there's no leaks coming out of the coolant system. I'm going to check my engine oil by making sure the engine's off, removing the dipstick, wiping it off, reinserting it, pulling it out, reading that it's between the add and the full marks. I'm going to check my air compressor, making sure it's properly mounted, that it's got no cracks or illegal welds. I'm going to check to make sure that it has no leaks and that the air compressor is gear driven. I'm going to check my power steering fluid reservoir, making sure it's properly mounted. I'm going to read that it's between the add and the full marks. I'm going to check to make sure the cap is present and on tight, and there are no leaks coming from underneath the power steering fluid system. I'm going to check my water pump, making sure it's properly mounted, that it's got no cracks or illegal welds, that it's not leaking. It's also gear driven. I'm going to check the, belt driven. I'm going to check the belt the same way. I'm going to check my frame, my front and rear leaf spring mounts, leaf spring, U-bolts, shock absorber, and shock absorber mounts, making sure they're all properly mounted. They have no cracks or illegal welds. I'm going to check to make sure there's no leaks in the shock absorber and that the leaf spring is not scissoring. I'm going to check my steering control arm, my gearbox, my pitman arm, drag link, upper and lower control arm, and tie rod, making sure they're all properly mounted, not have no cracks or illegal welds. I'm going to check to make sure all my castle nuts and cotter pins are in place. I'm going to check my steering column, making sure it doesn't move more than 10 degrees when twisted, that there are no leaks coming out of the gearbox. I'm going to check my brake chamber, ABS line and air line, making sure they're properly mounted. They have no cracks or illegal welds, that there are no holes in the system, that there are no leaks coming out of either of these components. I'm going to check my slack adjuster and push rod, making sure they're properly mounted. They have no cracks or illegal welds. I'm going to check to make sure the clevis and cotter pins are in place. And if I need to check brake adjustment, I can chalk the wheels, release the brakes, and push and pull on the push rod. It should not move more than 1 inch. I'm going to check my brake linings and brake drums, making sure they're properly mounted. They have no cracks. They have not been worn dangerously thin, and that they have no greasy or oily stains. I'm going to check the tires, making sure they're worn evenly across the surface, that they have no less than 4/32 of tread depth. I'm going to check to make sure the sidewalls are not cut, cracked, or damaged. I'm going to check to make sure the tires properly mounted on the rim. I'm going to check the tire pressure with a tire pressure gauge. I'm going to check the rims, making sure they're properly mounted, that they have no cracks or illegal welds. I'm going to check to make sure that the lug nuts are properly mounted, that they have no rusty or shiny threads indicating looseness. I'm going to check the hub seal and the valve stem, making sure they're properly mounted, they have no leaks. I'm going to check this light on the side of the cab, making sure it's properly mounted in amber in color, just like I did the front of the truck. This light is a clearance light, left turn indicator, and full-way flasher. I'm going to check the mirror, making sure it's properly mounted, that it has no cracks, illegal obstructions, or stickers. I'm going to check to make sure it's not damaged, not missing any hardware. I'm going to check the door, making sure it's properly mounted. I'm going to check to make sure that the door opens, the door latches open and close. And I'm going to check the door hinges by lifting up on the bottom corner of the door. I'm going to check the door seal, making sure it is not broke, that it is not dry rotted or cracked, that it makes a tight seal. I'm going to check my steps, making sure they're properly mounted. I'm going to check to make sure they have no foreign debris, that they support the weight of the driver. They're not broken in any way. I'm going to check my air lines and electrical lines between the tractor and trailer, just like I did in the engine compartment. I'm going to check the catwalk and the steps on the rear of the tractor, just like I did in the front of the tractor. I'm going to check the fuel tank, making sure it's properly mounted. I'm going to check to make sure that the cap, gasket, and chain are present and on tight. I'm going to check to make sure there are no leaks coming out from underneath the fuel tank. And I'm going to check my rubber straps, making sure they're properly mounted. They're not dry rotted or cracked. There are no signs of shifting or looseness. I'm going to check my exhaust system and my drive shaft, making sure they're properly mounted. I'm going to look for any soot or rust coming from the exhaust system, indicating a leak. And I'm going to check for any cracks or missing hardware in the drive shaft. I'm going to check my fittings and connections on the rear of the tractor, making sure they're tight. I'm going to make sure there are no damage, that they're properly mounted, they have no leaks. I'm going to check the electrical pin, making sure it's in the locked position, and that it's secure. I'm going to check the DOT reflective on the rear of the tractor, making sure it's properly mounted, half red, half white. I'm going to check the mud flaps on the rear of the tractor, making sure they're properly mounted and secure, and they're no more than 8 inches off the ground. I'm going to check my front leaf spring mounts, leaf springs, U-bolts, shock absorber mounts on the rear of the tractor, just like I did the front of the tractor. In addition, I'm going to check that my airbag and my airbag mounts are properly mounted. I'm going to check to make sure that the airbag is not damaged, that it has no cracks or dry rot, and there are no cracks or illegal welds. I'm going to check the brake chambers, ABS lines, air lines, slack adjuster push rod, and brake linings and brake drums on the rear of the tractor, just like I did on the front of the tractor. I'm going to check the tires, making sure there's no less than 2/32 of tread depth. I'm going to check to make sure it's worn evenly across the surface, that the sidewalls are not damaged, they have no cracks, cuts, or abrasions. I'm going to check to make sure the tires are properly mounted. I'm going to check their tire pressure with tire pressure gauge. I'm going to check the rims, the lug nuts, the axle seal, and the valve stem on the rear of the tractor, just like I did on the front of the tractor. I'm going to check the bud spacing, making sure the rims are tightly bolted together, that there's no foreign debris and no gap. I'm going to check my fifth wheel mounting bracket, platform base, skid plate, locking pins, release lever, and sliding fifth wheel locking pins, making sure they're all properly mounted. They have no cracks or illegal welds, that the sliding fifth wheel has no leaks. I'm going to check to make sure it's not missing any hardware. I'm going to check all air lines and electrical lines running to the rear of the tractor, just like I did the engine compartment. I'm gonna check my mud flaps on the rear of the tractor, just like I did in the front. I'm gonna check my lights. These are my tail lights, stop lights, left turn indicator, right turn indicator, and full-way flasher lights. I'm gonna check to make sure they're red in color, just like I did in the front of the truck. I'm gonna check my reflectors, making sure they're properly mounted, red in color, not broken. I'm gonna check my apron and my kingpin, making sure they're properly mounted. They have no cracks or illegal welds. I'm gonna check to make sure that there's no gap between the plate and the apron, and I'm gonna check that the kingpin is in the fifth wheel and the locking jaws are locked around the kingpin. I'm gonna check my cross supports underneath the trailer, making sure none are missing. I'm gonna check to make sure there are no cracks or illegal welds in any of the cross supports. I'm gonna check my landing gear, making sure it's properly mounted, that the feet are in the fully lifted position, and that the crank is stowed away. I'm gonna check my bulkhead, making sure it's properly mounted, that all the rivets and hardware are in place. I'm gonna check that there are no holes, cuts, rips, or tears in the bulkhead. I'm gonna check my clearance lights on the top of the trailer, making sure they're amber in color, just like I did the front of the truck. I'm gonna check my glad hands and my electrical line, making sure they're properly mounted. I'm gonna check to make sure there are no leaks in the system. I'm gonna check to make sure that the grommets or the gaskets in the glad hand are not cut, torn, or frayed. I'm gonna check to make sure there's no leaks, and I could check the pins inside of the electrical connection, making sure they're secure. I'm gonna check the side of the trailer and the skirt, just like I did the bulkhead. I'm gonna check the DOT tape on the side of the trailer, just like I did on the rear of the tractor. I'm gonna check that this clearance light, left turn indicator, and full-way flasher light is properly mounted, amber in color, just like I did the front of the tractor. I'm gonna check this reflector, making sure it's amber in color, just like I did in the rear of the tractor. I'm gonna check all air lines and electrical lines running to the rear of the trailer, just like I did the engine compartment. I'm gonna check my tandem frame, my tandem locking pin, and my tandem release lever, making sure they're properly mounted, that they have no cracks or illegal welds. I'm gonna check to make sure that the tandem pin is locked inside of a tandem slot, and that the tandem release lever is stowed away and locked. I'm gonna check my front and rear leaf spring mounts, leaf springs and U-bolts on the rear of the trailer, just like I did on the rear of the tractor. I'm gonna check my brake chambers, ABS lines, air lines, slack adjusters, push rods, brake linings, and brake drums on the rear of the trailer, just like I did on the rear of the tractor. I'm gonna check my tires, their overall appearance, their tread wear, their pressure, the bud spacing, the rims, the lug nuts, the axle seals, and the valve stem on the rear of the trailer, just like I did on the rear of the tractor. I'm gonna check the mud flaps on the rear of the trailer, just like I did on the rear of the tractor. On the rear of the trailer, I'm gonna check the DOT tape, just like I did in the rear of the tractor. I'm gonna check my clearance lights, tail lights, stop lights, right turn indicator, left turn indicator, full-way flasher lights, making sure they're red in color, just like I did the front of the truck. I'm gonna check the bumper, making sure it's properly mounted, that it has no foreign debris. I'm gonna check the door, making sure it's properly mounted, that it's not damaged in any way, that it has no holes, cuts, rips, or tears. I'm gonna check to make sure that the door is in the locked position. I'm gonna inspect the passenger side of the vehicle, just like I did the driver's side. I'm now going to have the examiner assist me in checking my lights. I'm going to have the examiner, check my headlights, high beam, left turn indicator, right turn indicator, and full wave flasher on the front of the tractor and on the side of the cab. I'm going to have the inspector check all of my clearance lights going to the rear of the trailer as he walks to the rear. Once he gets to the rear of the trailer, he's going to inspect my tail lights, my stop lights, my left turn indicator on the rear of the tractor, the side of the trailer, and the rear of the trailer, and the right turn indicator on the rear of the tractor, side of the trailer, and rear of the trailer. He's going to check my full wave flashers on the rear of the tractor, side of the trailer, and rear of the trailer. I will now have the examiner get into the cab, where I will have him check my interior inspection. I'm going to begin by checking my seat belt, making sure it's properly mounted, that it has no holes, cuts, rips, or tears, and that it latches and unlatches. I'm going to check my windshield and my side glass, making sure they're all properly mounted, that they have no cracks or any sort of obstruction or damage. They're clean and clear. I'm going to check my mirrors, making sure they're properly mounted, they have no legal obstructions or stickers, that they're adjusted to me, and that I can see to the rear of the trailer. I'm going to check my city horn and my air horn, making sure that they sound. I'm going to check my windshield wipers, making sure they're not cut, cracked, or damaged. I'm going to check to make sure that they clean the windshield and that the windshield wiper fluid dispenses. I'm going to check the heat, making sure that it comes out at the floorboard. And I'm going to check the defrost on the windshield. I'm going to check to make sure that I have 6 spare fuses, 3 safety triangles, and a properly mounted ABC fire extinguisher with the pin in place and fully charged. I will now check the lights. I'm going to check to make sure that the ABS system light comes on and goes off, indicating the system works properly. I'm going to check the headlight, high beam, left turn indicator, right turn indicator, and full wave flasher lights illuminate on the dash. I will now do a safe start of the truck, making sure the truck is in neutral. With the brakes set, I'm going to start the truck. As the truck starts, I'm going to check to make sure that I have between 40 and 60 pounds of pressure, oil pressure. I'm going to check to make sure that my water temperature rises to 160 to 180 pounds, that I'm rising to 120 to 140 pounds of air, and that I have between 12 and 14 volts. I'm going to wait for my air pressure to rise to begin testing my brakes. going to test the trailer brakes by releasing the tractor brakes and putting the truck in drive. I'm going to lower it down to first gear, where I'm going to listen for the engine to pull against the trailer brakes. And there the engine begins to struggle to pull the brakes. I'm now going to pull the tractor brakes and release the trailer brakes. I'm going to complete the same test. And there the engine pulled against the brakes. I'm now going to release all of my brakes, and I'm going to rise to between 3 and 5 miles an hour. I'm going to keep my hands off the wheel, and as I apply the brakes, I'm going to look for the wheel to turn to the left or right. I am now going to let my air pressure rise to begin my lab test. I'm going to apply my trailer brakes. When the governor cuts out, I'm going to shut the truck off. I'm going to take the key with me, and I'm going to set a chock. I'm going to reinsert the key and turn the truck on, but I'm not going to start the truck. I'm going to let all my gauges calibrate. And I'm going to release my trailer brakes. I am going to put my foot on the brake pedal, and I'm going to hold it there for 1 minute. As I hold my foot on the brake pedal, I'm going to listen for any air leaks coming out of the valves or out of the dash. I'm going to listen for any air leaks in the truck. I'm going to look at my air pressure, and I'm going to check to make sure I don't lose more than 4 psi over the course of a minute. It's been a minute and we have not lost more than 4 psi. I'm now going to begin fanning down my brakes. Between 60 and 90 pounds, I'm going to listen for a light and an alarm to come on indicating low air pressure. I'm going to then continue to fan down my brakes, and between 20 and 40 pounds, my valves should pop out. My low air light alarm came on. And my valves popped out at 30 pounds. I'm now going to restart the truck using a safe start. And I'm going to wait for the truck to build up between 120 to 140 pounds, where the governor will cut out, and that'll conclude my vehicle inspection.